Welcome back, friends. So it's a joy to be here with you. Great to see Dr. Fred and Elizabeth. Welcome. Also, just an update for those who haven't been with us recently. We're covering this book. Dr. Fred, you may have it, you may not. Material Success Through Yoga Principles. This is an incredible course that Swami Kriyananda wrote around 2005 when he was in India. And originally it was 26 lessons that were given out, one lesson every 2 weeks over a whole year period. And just this past January, Crystal Clarity published it in this beautiful book format. We have it also in audiobook and audiobook read by Swami Kriyananda, which is really thrilling. If you don't have that as well, you can get it on Audible or our website. And tonight we're on lesson 6. And the topic is first things first. So this is our informal book study. So if you have questions, inspirations, comments, feel free to unmute yourself, type them in the chat as you feel inspired. I'm just going to read a little bit from the principles, and then we'll discuss each lesson. I should add, for those who haven't been with us, each lesson has 4 parts: the principles, the application, meditation, and affirmation. And then actually there's 5 parts technically. There are workbook ideas for each lesson on how you can apply them. And there's summary points to remember and workbook ideas. So there's a lot of material within each lesson, and we could spend a lot of time on each lesson, but we're just having this one session for our book study. So I'm going to jump ahead here. First things first, Swami is talking about what his bottom line is. And of course, in America, that phrase, the bottom line, is very popular in terms of, money is the bottom line and making money is the bottom line. And Swami's not denying that. Of course, the name of the course is Material Success, but through yoga principles. And what he's saying is if we focus only on making money, it's like a hollow, it's like a beautiful temple, but with no one in it. So it's a hollow victory. So the real corresponding, the lasting inner joy and satisfaction is what we're really after. And in fact, that bottom line that Swami talked about for himself of being peace was his bottom line. And he was an incredibly creative and prolific person, and yet he never allowed the demands on his time to impact his inner peace. And he made that his priority. And in fact, Swami would say, and maybe it was in this lesson, that it was because of that, because he made peace his bottom line, that he could be so creative, because he did not compromise that principle. And since he took the time to rest in his higher self, to rest in the self, so to speak, it was because of that centeredness that he was able to meet people in their center and meet the demands of whatever the situation called for. So let me, in fact, I'm jumping. If you have the book, I'm on page 86. I say all this only to clarify the following point. Always, in spite of these pressures, I have never allowed my bottom line, quote unquote, to become monetary. That place of priority was given to my inner peace. When merchants stood in line, figuratively speaking, demanding payment, and when people tried to block whatever I attempted, as not a few did, I never allowed my inner peace to become affected. Peace was my priority. Being a Swami didn't exempt me, unfortunately, from the pressures of modern life. I had a work to develop and had therefore to place myself willingly under a stress not so different from that of the business tycoon whose way of life I had renounced for God. With God's grace, I succeeded. I don't believe it would have been possible, however, had I not made inner peace my priority. But this is a beautiful sharing here from Swami Kriyananda. And um, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, you may have heard of something called Ashtanga Yoga. And there's all different types of yoga now that we hear in America, but Ashtanga Yoga actually means 8 limbs, or the 8 stages of the soul's unfoldment to union with God. And the first stage is yama. And the first yama is ahimsa, or nonviolence. And I found that interesting, relating this to what Swami has shared, that how he made inner peace his bottom line. He really was saying he lived a life of ahimsa, of nonviolence, of peace. There was a story from Swami's life that he was secluding sometime. I don't remember exactly where. It was in the Southwest, maybe in Arizona. It doesn't matter. But there was a family that happened to be on a trip, and they had been arguing. It was a husband and wife, and I think they had 2 kids, and they were, cooped up in their car, and they had gotten into bickering with one another. And they happened to stop where Swami Kriyananda was taking his seclusion. He had, I think, I don't know the location, but for whatever reason, their paths crossed. And they were able to actually have a meal together. And after that meal, they then went along on their way, and the husband and wife noticed they had stopped arguing, they had stopped bickering, and they realized that it was in part, it was the influence of Swami Kriyananda. And it wasn't Swami Kriyananda, it was the vibrations of peace, right, that he had tuned into in his seclusion. And they were open to him on some level. They had talked and whatever happened. Um, but think about the way the world would change if everyone made peace their bottom line. The way that we would act, the way we would interact would change dramatically. Of course, we're in an ascending. We're in a still it's a lower age. We're in an ascending age. There's more energy flooding the planet, and we're seeing that, yeah, how it's breaking down all institutions, political and the like. But the important thing for us is to not let that new energy come in and that we just run wild with it, but that we have a sense of centeredness with it. Um, there is another story in this chapter on page 87. I knew a very successful American businessman, a multimillionaire indeed, and a disciple of my guru. This man was exceptionally busy, being the chairman of several board of directors. Yet his practice was often not to come to work until sometime in the afternoon. His morning hours were devoted to meditation. Colleagues would sometimes remonstrate with him, "With all your responsibilities, how can you afford to be away from your office so long?" "Because I have so many," he answered. "I need those morning hours to deepen my peace. In that way, I can handle matters more efficiently when I do address them, and can accomplish more in a minute than would be possible for me if I were to sit at my desk all day long. Decisions that some people take weeks to make, I am able to make almost instantly." This is Rajasi Janakananda, James Lin, who Yogananda called Saint Lin, that Swami is referring to here. But again, that he made peace his bottom line, and he connected with God first in his meditation, and then he was able to go about his activity with his businesses. This reminds me very much of the famous counsel of Jesus Christ: seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. This is one of the secrets of success, and that Swami is talking about throughout this course. And I think, in fact, there's a whole lesson on magnetism. I can't remember what the lesson is, but Swami talks about it throughout, that the real secret of success is our magnetism, right? That magnetism that he was emanating in that seclusion that that family took in, the magnetism that James Lin, Rajasi Janakananda, that he felt from his deep meditations, and he was able to then utilize that to make decisions that were important in his businesses. When our magnetism shifts, this is something interesting. I just heard it in our Sunday service with Nayaswami Parvati, and we have those rays of the one light readings. They're parallels between the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. And this past week, what was the topic? I think it was to each according to his faith. And there was one line in there about faith. Faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. That was the way Swami Kriyananda was describing faith within, and I'm not going to go into the whole reading, but that one part, faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. Who we are, right, is we're always emanating some vibration. We're always, in a sense, affirming something, aren't we? If we're agitated or upset. I've shared these stories that we have a farm family here. Dharma Devi and I have a cow, we have a pet cow, a couple of goats, and 2 dogs and 6 chickens. And I've noticed if I am agitated, that of course, the animals they're in the present moment and they're feeling that. The other night, I was trying to get the cow into the barn, and it was like 7:30, 7:40. It was dusk. It was getting dark. And she just wasn't coming. I tried to coax her with grain, and usually she would come, with grain. She loves that. And she'll come to the barn or hay. And I couldn't get her in. And I thought, what am I doing? I'm doing something wrong here. And then I realized, oh, I haven't tried the brush. I haven't tried, in other words, love. And I went over and I just, gave her a few brushes, and that shifted my energy. It shifted hers, and she loved the brush. And then she just simply followed me into the barn. So faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness, who we are, right? It's more important. That is the real secret. And so how do we become something greater than the little self? How do we move from, right, from ego consciousness and from limitation to limitlessness to infinity? What we need to learn to use our ego in the right way. And one is this principle that we place a priority to that highest principle, and that we do our best. We try to carry it throughout our day. And this is why meditation is vital, because it helps us to make that connection, to have the experience of inner peace, and to feel the attractive power, so to speak, of God's love, of God's peace, and to feel ourselves. When you get into deep meditation, I can't say I've had this experience often, but so I remember hearing Swami say this. There'll be a point where you just feel like you're gone, not like you've spaced out. I mean, that's that's poor meditation when we space out or when we're daydreaming. But when you just feel that your consciousness is merged with a greater consciousness, and perhaps you've felt that, or you have felt the divine working through you in a certain sense. So it's making that connection with God first and then holding on to it and trying to remember, oh, the actions that will lead to unity. Like for me the other night, using the brush, right? Using an act of love, of connection, things that unite us, that they are reminding us of our bliss. And every because God is a pure state of infinite consciousness, and everything is a manifestation comes from God's consciousness, from consciousness to thought to energy into matter. And so when we meditate and we have an experience of God, we're tuning back in, right? We're attuning our consciousness to that infinite bliss, that love, the all the ineffable divine blessings. There was another part here. I read this whisper from eternity, the demand for balance. O Spirit, teach me to pray and pray with deep concentration. Balance my concentration with devotion. Purify my devotion with all surrendering love unto thee. Uh, Swami said, this is on page 89 if you have the book. It is important to understand also that if one sincerely desires to achieve material success through yogic principles, he must also live a balanced life. This is a very important point, right? Balance. Uh, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita puts it in a simple way. He says that he who doesn't eat too much or eat too little, sleep too much or sleep too little. He's talking about moderation. And and in many ways it's easier to be extreme. It's easier to swing from one pole to the other. I think of it reminds me of Babaji, Autobiography of a Yogi. I'm sure I think everyone here has read that book. But Babaji is talking about this time that the spiritual efficiency of the West to be married with the the spiritual efficiency of the East to be married with the material efficiency of the West, so that we form this golden middle path, this balanced golden middle path. Um, and in Yogananda's teachings, in his original lessons, it's very interesting. Every lesson, he would have these very deep spiritual principles. He would have application, like the course here with Swami, techniques, Kriya Yoga. But in every lesson, he would also have a recipe. He would have some type of, vegetarian recipe, mushroom casserole, or, he started at in Hollywood, the Hollywood church there, mushroom burgers, right? And Yogananda was like the first veggie burger, aficionado. He was creative in bringing the spiritual principles into daily life, right? Trying to help people to balance. And that's why I think he was very enthusiastic, as are we, very enthusiastic about spiritual communities, because they offer the opportunity for you to live a balanced life, right? He would say if your church, your job, your everything is in one place, that's why I see that you're steadily progressing, right? It allows you to live a balanced, harmonious life. And And when Swami Kriyananda, who was a young monk when he first met Yogananda at the age of 22, Yogananda said, and Swami was so enthusiastic, right, about these teachings, and he just had the thought, God, I want to share them with everyone. I want to find God and I want to share God with all. And Yogananda knew that he had this uh, galloping zeal, so to speak. And he said to him one time, Walter, because that's what he called him then, Walter, proceed with slow speed. He was essentially saying, make haste slowly, right? And he said, slow and steady wins the race. This is again, in order to achieve material success through yoga principles, we're attuning to the yogic principle of yoga. And by that I mean union, spirit, the infinite, God, oneness, however you think about it, that principle, and placing that as our bottom line, that helps us get in tune with that longer rhythm. There was somewhere in the lesson too, um, I think it was in the application section. Let me see if I can find it, where, yeah, this is, again, if you have the book, I'm jumping forward, page 95 under the application. Sometimes I think naturally I have not been able to live up to my own highest ideals. At such times I have never lamented, oh, I'm a failure. Instead, what I've done is simply acknowledge my mistake to myself, and have then told myself firmly, I have not yet succeeded. My affirmation of eventual success has enabled me in time to honor my never faltering resolution. Thus, every failure must be seen as only apparent and can be turned to eventual success. And then jumping one paragraph forward, remember, in the search for perfection, you have eternity before you. The essential thing always is to be completely sincere with yourself. In practicing ahimsa, harmlessness, remember that the same divine self is struggling in every ego to achieve final perfection. This is beautiful. This is very powerful. So I and this is what I love about Swami. It's very practical. I mean, which one of us can say that we've lived up to our high ideals all the time? I don't think anyone who's honest would raise their hand. So, but it's very common, perhaps more so in the West with the Judeo-Christian background. There's a lot of shame, blame, and guilt. Oh, I'm a sinner. Remember that story that Yogananda told? He was in some church, probably, it was a Christian church, and a fundamentalist church, and the preacher said, "You're all sinners, get on your knees." And Yogananda said, "I was the only one that did not kneel down because I refused to accept that I was a sinner." And he would say, remember, the greatest sin is to call yourself a sinner, because then it just gives you the excuse to go on sinning. So, but this is an honest approach here with Swami. I have not yet succeeded. To not get into the blame game and to beat ourselves up, just to acknowledge it, yes. To be honest with ourselves, yes. And at the same time, to continue to move forward and to have that kind of affirmation is affirming eventual success. And then he goes on, this is really beautiful. Uh, some people's paths lie through dark shadows of rebellion and suffering. No matter how winding and tormented their way, however, the end of every soul's journey is eternal bliss. How can it be otherwise? All of us were made from bliss itself. Love everyone, therefore, all are expressions of your own infinite self. Love everyone with the sympathy one naturally feels for fellow strugglers on a hard journey. All men are pilgrims on the path to infinite consciousness, even if they are not aware of the fact. I thought this is a beautiful part in the application. And it's, you know, excuse me, one time, Nayaswami Devi, right, who are Ananda, the spiritual directors of Ananda worldwide, they were with Swami in India. And I think they were having breakfast and maybe they were talking about the path and sort of in this line, like of thinking, God, it takes really such a long time, the soul's long journey through time and space for redemption. And Swami, I think, was having a bowl of oatmeal or whatever it was, and he put his spoon down and he said, the spiritual path is all about dissolving the ego. And that's done through two things: deeper, longer, thirsty, guru given meditation. And secondly, seeing and feeling that God is the doer in all your actions. And it's that second one that I wanted to highlight. God is the doer. There's really only one thing happening. There's really only one doer. I mean, it's the most mind-boggling truth. In Yogananda's poem, Samadhi, there's that one line, knowing, knower, known as one, right? Meaning meditating, the meditator, and what we're meditating on are one. We can't understand these things with our intellect. That's why we have to open ourselves in meditations. It's only through intuitive perception that we can have these deeper realizations. But along the way, we can act in such a way that affirms that deeper truth and that higher reality. And I'm grateful to Swami for sharing this, that all men, right, are pilgrims on the path to infinite consciousness. And there's an affirmation that Swami gives in Ananda Yoga. It's the spinal twist. You can do it because we've been sitting for a while. You just twist in your chair. If you hold the bottom with your right hand and bring your left hand to the back, and then you twist from your base of the spine and the chest and then the neck, and feel that opening in the heart center, keeping a straight spine, but getting this gentle spinal twist. And then close the eyes and feel from your heart center that you're tuning into this truth. All men are pilgrims on the path to infinite consciousness. And then affirm mentally, I radiate love and goodwill to soul friends everywhere. And then let's balance, because we're talking about balance. Let's do the other side. Just rotate to the right, hold the chair with the bottom part with the left hand, bring the right behind your chair if it's there. Opening, feel that opening in the heart. I radiate love and goodwill to soul friends everywhere. And then gently bring yourself back to center. And then let's do a rubbing the palms exercise to feel the prana in the palms. Magnetize the palms, rub them together vigorously. And you're going to start to feel the heat in the palms. Let's keep going a little bit longer than we would normally. And then hold the palms close. Do you feel that kind of ball of energy if you bring them close and then apart? And then again, rub. Now hold the palms above the head, outturned, and we'll chant Om 3 times to send, to radiate this love and goodwill through this energy. Om. 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 Simple, beautiful practice, right? So at the end of our meditations, we close with healing prayers like that, radiating love and goodwill to soul friends everywhere. Maybe some of you have been to Ananda Village and have been in the Temple of Light. I know Marie has. I've seen Marie there. Stephanie one day, God willing. But there's it's this beautiful dome-like structure. Maybe you've been in a dome or a yurt or something like that. When we chant Om, right, our real vision is omnidirectional, right? The divine vision is center everywhere, circumference nowhere, as Yogananda said. So when you chant Om, feel like that you're radiating love and goodwill like in a force field, right? That's going out, just as you drop a pebble in a lake and it ripples out, that you're sending these ripples of peace out to the world. Let me pause. I have been talking the whole time. Comments, questions, anything from anything. Doesn't have to be from this lesson.
Narayan,
Yeah, Dr. Fred, please.
how do you define consciousness and reaching a higher consciousness to acknowledge or be aware of God?
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Fred. Um, Sat Chit Ananda is the Sanskrit word. Sat, ever exist, which is roughly translated as ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. And Yogananda added that ever new bliss part at the end. So, what is consciousness? I mean, this is the tough thing. We need consciousness to understand what consciousness is. We have to use our own consciousness to commune with it, knowing, knower, known. And it's completely ineffable. Anandamoy Ma said it this way, which is a brain buster. He is and he is not, and neither is he, nor is he not. It's you sort of like, what do you do with that? It's sort of twist your we need to shake ourselves out of, there's no way that we can understand consciousness, Dr. Fred, without uh, lifting our consciousness. And this is, I think maybe even last week we talked about it and you weren't here. Uh, there is a Sunday service talk that Nayaswami Jaya gave that I would encourage you to watch. It was a beautiful one. And he asked just the question that you just asked. He was asking, well, what is consciousness? And it's interesting. He said he looked in the dictionary. That word came first into existence around 1700. That's interesting because Yogananda and Swami Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's guru, said that Dwapara Yuga, the age we're in now, Dr. Fred, the age of energy, started in 1700, and there was a 200-year bridge period, and that it began more properly in 1900. We have the Industrial Revolution, right? Steamboat, electricity, radio, all these things that are harnessing energy. And Jaya, he made this very interesting point. I hadn't thought about it. He said there's this I'm sure you've heard of it, Dr. Fred, this debate with technology and AI. Is AI is it conscious? And Jaya was saying it's like it's a that's a Kali Yuga, or a material age mentality. It's a remnant, like a comet trailing, sort of behind it. It's a remnant of Kali Yuga that we think, well, we can manufacture consciousness with matter. We can make a supercomputer that is going to be super conscious and even more smart. And well, if the computer and if the AI is smarter than we are intellectually, that doesn't we're still stuck with ourselves. We still have to have the realization. So how do we, so Jaya's point was that it's sort of, it's the inverse, right? Consciousness becomes matter. Swami says that matter is a manifestation of divine energy, right? So we have pure infinite consciousness, which is like an invisible ocean of spirit. We can't, there's no words for it, even though Satchidananda is something that comes close to it. And then we have, from that spirit, it condenses into thought, and then from thought into energy, and energy into matter. So this is why, Dr. Fred, the bridge, the missing link to get back to our origin of pure consciousness as the soul, as an individualized spark of spirit, is through meditation. But the way that Yogananda taught meditation in this new age, uh, I think you're aware of the energization exercises, right? The tensing and relaxing the different body parts. He's helping us to tune into ourselves as beings of energy, because the energy is the link. It's going to help us go from the delusion that we're the body to the realization of the truth that we are soul, that we're spirit. My friend, and some of you have met her, we've had satsangs, Nayaswami Shivani. Do you remember the Healing with Life Force books that we've come out with, the trilogy? And Shivani's got a great sense of humor. She said, how many people here have a soul? And she would ask that question, and everyone would say, okay. And they would, you would probably say, yes, I have a soul. And she would say, no, you are the soul. You have a body, right? This, in other words, Dr. Fred, our waking state that we're in right now, this is our altered state of consciousness. Our true state is Sat Chit Ananda, is the soul. And that's why every person, I'm sure you've read or heard someone share a near-death experience. Anyone that goes through a near-death experience, they come back changed to the core of their being, because they've had that touch of the realization that they are the soul, and that they're here with a divine purpose to, like Yogananda said, to be educated and to be entertained. So how do we get there? That's where meditation comes in, Dr. Fred. That's where communion with God is essential. And this is something interesting. I read it in it's another crystal clarity book called The Essence of Self-Realization, which I would highly recommend. And we have it in audiobook format as well. And in there, I forget the context, because these are different sayings of Yogananda, and they're broken out by different topics. But Yogananda is talking about uh, saints in India versus Christian saints. And someone asked him, well, about the difference. And he said, well, yeah, some Christian saints, they do gain spiritually from their uh, morality, from their chastity, and etc. But he said not many rise spiritually, and not many have realization because they don't have technique. And I found that, and what are we talking about? Material success through yoga principles. In other words, you need a technique, you need a way, Dr. Fred, right, of awakening. You need a way to snap yourself out of the hypnotism that you are the body and the personality. The ego, Yogananda said, is the soul identified with the body and the personality. But the yoga science, goes deeper. It helps us unravel that mystery. Uh, in fact, I was mentioning Jaya. He was giving a Kriya initiation some months ago that I was at, and this is without sharing anything about Kriya. But he was talking about the ego. It was very interesting at this Kriya initiation and he was saying in a way you could think of the ego as your inhalation and exhalation, as your breath. Right? Swami Kriyananda said your ego is a bundle of self-definitions. When you see something you like, right? We inhale, we affirm life. When we something we don't like, right? We sigh. Well, what are we learning to do in the yoga science? We're learning to bring the breath. Remember that at the very beginning, our brief mini meditation that we just did? We inhaled, we held the breath, and we exhaled for the same count. Yogananda called that something like even count breathing. Inhale for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5. Inhale for 7, hold 7, exhale for 7. When you now there's a lot of teaching out there that your exhale should be longer than the inhale. Well, there's truth to that. That happens when you sleep, Dr. Fred. The exhalation is double the inhalation. And what happens when you sleep? You're healing, right? The body, it's expelling toxins. You're going into deep sleep, delta brain waves, and then beautiful things happen. We know that we feel revivified when we sleep. Sri Yukteswar, you can go to the autobiography of a yogi, read the Resurrection of Sri Yukteswar chapter. And he said that when we go into deep dreamless sleep, that's rejuvenating because that gets us. The dreamless sleep is we're in touch with our causal body. When we're dreaming, we're using our astral body, right? So we have three bodies. We have the physical body, the astral energetic body, and the causal or the thought body. That last one, Dr. Fred, the causal body, it's closest to our soul nature. So in deep dreamless sleep, we feel that. But then coming back to the breath and Kriya Yoga, the inhale is equal to the exhale. And there's a reason for that. There's a yogic science reason for that. It brings us into a state of deep equanimity. Krishna says, offer inhale into exhale, offer exhale into inhale, right? The yogi can go into a state of suspended animation. Go back and read the chapter, again, Autobiography of a Yogi, The Sleepless Saint, Ram Gopal Muzumdar. And we don't want to jump to this point. Again, we have to be gradual. But he was an advanced yogi, and he would be in these super conscious states, and he wouldn't sleep. He was just he talked about it that even in sleep, the heart still has to pump. And when he went into the yogic trance, his heart could rest. So we need to, gradually move in that direction and use meditation to get into these higher states of consciousness, Dr. Fred.
But in meditation, sometimes, is it true that the ego dissolves? Like in Buddhism, they say there is no ego, anatta, non-ego. So in meditation, what if the ego, you realize there is no ego?
Yeah, that's the big delusion. That's the knowing, knower, known as one. And we get even more specific, right? The way that Yogananda You could read, I don't know if you have Whispers from Eternity, Dr. Fred. We have
No,
it free on,
I have Yogananda's other six books,
okay,
the ones we went over in class before.
right, right. I'll send you, we have Whispers from Eternity free online
Oh,
on ananda.org. And he talks about the poem Samadhi. Remember that poem I was mentioning?
Samadhi, yeah.
Yeah, he talks about there's Sabikalpa Samadhi and Nirbikalpa Samadhi. And Sabikalpa Samadhi is when one goes into that deep uh, experience of God consciousness, and their body is transfixed, and it's like it's like a stone statue that you leave the body, you commune with God, the infinite, but then when you come back, you can't retain that consciousness of being of one, of dissolving the ego. And so this is where Yogananda said, then there's the higher state is nirvikalpa samadhi. And in the poem, he says, tranquil, excuse me, unbroken thrill. So meaning it's an unbroken thrill. You, no matter it, when you're going through your daily life, exacting duties, you never lose that sense of inner freedom and oneness with God. That is where the ego is truly dissolved, Dr. Fred. So, yeah, the ego, but see, we're not saying it just from a philosophical perspective, like you have no ego. Well, yeah, that's true in the higher sense, but we want to realize it. That's why Yogananda called it self, capital S, realization. It's
Right.
realize the one and only self. Like Ananda Ma would say, it's a love solitary because it's omnipresent. It's the only thing. And yeah, how do we get there? Well, deeper, longer, thirsty, guru given meditation, and seeing God as the doer. So when things come up, and rather than us reacting, well, what's trying to happen here? What is my part? What's my lesson to learn? What's the opportunity for growth for me here? And we can start to feel that God is, he's doing it all. But yeah, this is very high states, and at the same time, we're not far. We've come a long to get to this point. The human life, human birth is a great gift, and it's not to there was that point in the lesson where Swami said, remember, in the search for perfection, you have eternity before you. Now, in one sense, you can feel like, oh my God, I've got to turn. But no, he means that in a hopeful sense, right? That we have eternity to perfect ourselves. Yogananda said, the day he wills, he's set on the path to freedom. So that's why the important thing is for us to cultivate the desire for that union, right? To offer ourselves, to offer the little self into the higher self. And again, how do we do that? That's where meditation and the yoga techniques are very helpful. In meditation, we talk about focusing at the point between the eyebrows. The medulla, Dr. Fred, the sixth chakra, base of your spine, first center, adjacent to reproductive organs, second, at the lumbar, third, at the heart is the fourth, the throat is the fifth center. The sixth chakra has two poles, the medulla oblongata, which is like the base of the brain, right? If you bring your hand back and you feel that indention at the base of the skull there, and you
Hmm.
massage that. This is one of the energization exercises that Yogananda gave, massaging and then tensing back and then relaxing forward. So the medulla is the seat of ego physiologically in the body. And this point between the eyebrows is the positive center. So we have the little self and then the infinite self. So we're one yoga posture is called the yogic seal, and Swami gave this where you bow the head like in a with in prayer mudra, and you can have the mudra behind the back. Anyway, the chin comes down to the sternum. What happens when you bow the head like that? It releases the medulla, and the affirmation is, "I am thine. Receive me." So this is an example of the right use of ego. Um, Goodness gracious, we're at our time here. So let's close with the meditation.
I just want to say
Yeah, please.
how much I appreciated that question and how many directions back to oneness it goes. It is so practical. And I'm one who appreciates philosophy and I just marvel at it, but to bring it practically to where I know I can experience that, that's what's really so thrilling about this path.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. And Dr. Fred, thanks for the question. It spurred us into a beautiful direction. Um, I'm dropping in the chat box for us all, but Dr. Fred especially, the whispers from
Uh-oh,
etern.
what happened?
Did I lose you guys? Am I
Lost
back?
me.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I
Yes,
hear you.
Okay.
I sent a message and somehow it was lost. This is
Oh,
Elizabeth.
oh, hi,
I
Elizabeth.
very much appreciate your explication, your response. I very much appreciate how you illuminated the relationship between us and our eternal connection. I just want to thank you for that. That's not what I wrote. I was a little bit more sophisticated than that, but however,
No,
but
that's beautiful.
somehow it got lost. But I want you to know how much I appreciate how you took your very time, more time than you needed, to explicate this matter in response to the question. Thank
That,
you so
oh,
much.
yeah, thank you,
You're
Elizabeth, for
so
sharing.
precious. Tonight,
God,
you're precious.
God is the doer. So, Dr. Fred, in the chat there, I don't know if you saw, click on that link. That'll take you to Whispers from Eternity. Everyone
Okay.
can click on that link. This is the whole book free online.
Oh, I
Uh,
am.
yeah, and if start reading, let's see, under it has all these different sections, preamble, forward, etc. There's prayer demands by subject, but if you go to poems at the bottom, samadhi uh, is going to be, isn't it? Yeah, samadhi is the fourth poem. And if you go to samadhi, then, and I'll drop the specific link in the chat box I'm talking about. At the end of samadhi, and this is the end of the poem samadhi, Dr. Fred, there's a explanation that I think you'll find really helpful. So let's close, and I'm just going to read only the first paragraph of that explanation, but let's take this as a meditation. So let's close the eyes. Samadhi means the oneness of human consciousness with cosmic consciousness. Man's consciousness is subject to relativity and dual experience. In meditation, there are three aspects: the meditator, the act of meditation, and God, the object of meditation. Samadhi is final union, which comes from deep, continuous, correct meditation. In this state, the three factors of meditation become one. Just as the wave melts in the sea, so the human soul becomes the Supreme Spirit.
Mm.
And let's close by sending out 3 ohms to our brothers and sisters on the path, pilgrim path to infinite consciousness, radiating love and goodwill to soul friends everywhere. Om. 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 Peace. Amen.